The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 12,000 years. 47 different alien species sat in the Grand Chamber, a massive room built on a space station called Nexus Prime. The chamber looked like a giant bowl, with seats rising up in circles, one above another. Beings of all shapes and sizes filled those seats. Some had scales, some had tentacles, some were made of living crystal, some looked like nothing humans had ever imagined. At the bottom of this bowl, in the very center, stood three humans. Admiral Park was 63 years old. His hair had turned silver at the temples and deep lines marked his face. He had spent 40 years in the Korean Navy, then another 10 working with the United Earth Defense Council. He had seen war. He had seen death. He had buried friends and enemies alike. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he had thought, until he came to this place. Beside him stood Commander. She was 41, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire career studying alien languages and cultures, preparing for a moment that most people on Earth believed would never come. Now that moment was here, and she kept her face perfectly calm, even as her heart beat fast in her chest. The third human was Lieutenant Lee. He was the youngest at 34, a tactical analyst who could look at any situation and see 10 different ways it could go wrong. Right now, he saw about 100. The three of them wore simple uniforms. No medals, no ribbons, no symbols of rank that the aliens would understand. They had been told that Earth was being evaluated for something called protectorate status. It was supposed to be a good thing. It meant protection from hostile species, access to galactic trade routes, a seat at the table of civilization. They had been wrong. The Archon floated down from its seat at the highest point of the chamber. It was the Speaker of the Council, a being made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 colors. When it spoke, its voice came as vibrations that the translation devices turned into words. Species designation, human, the Archon announced. Origin, Sol system, third planet. The Council has completed its evaluation. Did not move. He had been a soldier too long to show fear or anger. He simply waited. Technological classification, pre-expansion, the Archon continued. Your species has achieved basic space travel, but you remain limited to your own solar system. You have no faster-than-light capability. Your vessels still use chemical propulsion. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took a moment to realize it was laughter. Different species laughed in different ways, but the meaning was the same. They were being mocked. Military assessment, negligible, the Archon said. Your weapons systems are primitive. You have no energy shielding technology. Your orbital defense platforms are. It paused and could have sworn she heard amusement in its voice. Decorative. More laughter. A creature near the front of the chamber leaned forward. It was a serpent-like being covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. They were known throughout the galaxy as collectors. They collected resources. They collected technology. They collected species. Let us speak plainly, the ambassador said. Its voice was a hiss that the translator turned smooth and cold. These creatures are soft. They require specific atmospheric conditions to survive. They cannot tolerate temperature extremes. Their bodies break easily. It turned its wedge-shaped head toward the humans. They sleep for a third of their existence. They are blind to most light. They communicate by pushing air through holes in their faces. The laughter grew louder. Felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. Touched his arm gently, a warning. They had been briefed on this possibility. They had been told to stay calm no matter what happened. But no one had told them it would feel like this. The Archon raised one crystalline limb, and the chamber fell silent. The Council's decision is unanimous, it announced. Earth does not qualify for protectorate status. Your species lacks the technological, military, and biological requirements. Therefore, under Galactic Statute 773, Earth is classified as a harvest-eligible world. Felt something cold settle in his stomach. Harvest eligible. He knew what those words meant. They all did. The sovereignty has submitted a formal claim on your world and its population, the Archon continued. This claim has been approved. You have 30 standard cycles to prepare your population for integration into labor pools. 30 days. They were giving humanity 30 days to accept slavery. The ambassador smiled, if that expression could be called a smile. You should feel honored, it said. Your species will serve a purpose. Your labor will contribute to the great works of the galaxy. Is this not better than remaining alone on your little rock, waiting to die? Said nothing. Said nothing. Said nothing. The silence stretched on, and some of the aliens shifted in their seats. This was the part where the primitive species usually begged. They pleaded for mercy. They offered tribute. They asked for more time. They promised anything and everything if only they could be spared. The humans just stood there. The Archon tilted its crystalline head. Do you have a response, Admiral Park of Earth? Looked up at the Council. 47 species, thousands of years of civilization, technology that humans could barely understand, power that made Earth's mightiest weapons look like children's toys. He thought about his daughter back home. She was 32 now, with children of her own. He thought about Seoul, about the mountains where he had grown up, about the small fishing village where his grandfather had taught him to tie knots. He thought about everything humanity had built, everything they had dreamed, everything they had hoped to become. Then he looked at and nodded once. He looked at and nodded again. Without a single word, the three humans turned and walked toward the exit. The Council watched them go. Some of the aliens made sounds of confusion, others made sounds of approval. The weak always accepted their fate in the end. It was the natural order of things. The strong ruled and the weak served. The ambassador settled back in its seat, already making calculations. 8 billion humans, strong backs, clever hands. They would make excellent workers in the mining colonies. The children could be trained from birth. Within 3 generations, they would forget they had ever been free. As the massive doors closed behind the human delegation, the ambassador allowed itself a moment of satisfaction. This had been easy. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, alarms began to sound in facilities that officially did not exist. Men and women who had trained for decades for a moment they hoped would never come received coded messages on devices that were not supposed to work. And in a bunker beneath the mountains of Korea, a single red light began to blink. The light had a name. It was called the Hidden Blade. Admiral Park had not spoken in the council chamber because there was nothing to say. Humanity's answer would not come in words. It would come in fire. The news reached Earth 6 hours after the council made its decision. Every television, every radio, every phone and computer screen carried the same message. Humanity had been judged. Humanity had been found weak. Humanity had 30 days before they came to take them away. The governments of the world expected panic. They expected riots in the streets, looting, violence, the complete breakdown of society. They had made plans for this. Police and military units were placed on high alert. Emergency shelters were prepared. Food and water were stockpiled. None of it was needed. Something strange happened instead. Something the aliens watching from their observation drones could not understand. Something that would later be studied by council scholars for centuries. Humanity went quiet. There were no riots. There was no looting. People went to work. They took their children to school. They cooked dinner and watched the sunset and held each other close at night. They did all the normal things that humans do as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In Seoul, Doctor was eating lunch when her phone rang. She was 57 years old, a physicist who had spent 30 years working on theories that her colleagues called impossible. She had written papers about folding space, about creating tunnels through dimensions, about things that broke every known law of physics. Everyone had laughed at her, just like they laughed at the humans in the council chamber. The voice on the phone gave her an address and told her to come immediately. When she arrived, she found a car waiting. The car took her to a helicopter. The helicopter took her to a place in the mountains that did not appear on any map. Deep underground, she found 17 other scientists. Some of them she knew by reputation. Others she had never heard of. They all had one thing in common. They had all been told their ideas were crazy. Now they had 30 days to prove everyone wrong. A man in a military uniform stood at the front of the room. He introduced himself as General. His face was hard and his eyes were tired, and when he spoke, his voice was like gravel. "For 70 years, he said, we have known we were not alone. 70 years ago, we detected the first alien signal. We kept it secret. We had to. The world was not ready." He pressed a button and images appeared on the screens around the room. Ships, technology, weapons, things that humans had been studying in secret for decades. "We knew this day would come," the general continued. "We hoped it would not come in our lifetime, but it has come, and now we must do what we have always done. We must survive." He looked at each scientist in turn. "You have 30 days. Give us something we can fight with." Doctor looked at the images on the screens. She looked at the impossible technology. She thought about her theories, the ones everyone had laughed at. Then she got to work. Captain Shin received new orders aboard her submarine. She was 44 years old, the first woman to command a nuclear submarine in the Korean Navy. Her crew called her Iron Lady behind her back, and she pretended not to know. The orders told her to take her submarine to coordinates in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, coordinates that did not exist on any chart she had ever seen. She gave the command, and her submarine dove deep. When they arrived at the coordinates, they found a door in the ocean floor. The door opened, and the submarine passed through into a cavern so vast that could not see the far walls. Inside the cavern were ships. They were not submarines. They were not anything had ever seen before. They looked like weapons with engines attached, ugly and brutal and built for one purpose only: war. A man was waiting for her on the dock. He wore no uniform, but he carried himself like a soldier. "Welcome to Shipyard 17, he said. "Your submarine will be modified. Your crew will be trained on the new systems. You have 30 days. Looked at the ships. She looked at the weapons mounted on their hulls. She looked at the workers moving between them, working without rest, without complaint. "What are we building?" she asked. The man smiled. It was not a happy smile. "An answer," he said. In a small town outside, Park closed her bakery early. She was 51 years old, a retired sergeant who had served 15 years in the Korean Army before a bad knee sent her home. Now she made bread and cakes and watched her daughter grow up. Her daughter was 19, a university student with big dreams and a bigger heart. "I have to go," told her. "There is something I must do." Her daughter did not cry. She had grown up hearing stories about her mother's service. She knew what duty meant. "Will you come back?" she asked. Held her close. She smelled the flower in her daughter's hair, felt the warmth of her body, remembered the day she was born. "I will try," she said. Then she drove to an address she had memorized 20 years ago and never forgotten. A place she had been told did not exist. A place where soldiers who were officially retired gathered to train for a war they hoped would never come. The building looked like an abandoned factory. Inside, it was something else entirely. Found 300 other veterans waiting. Men and women her age, some older, some younger. All of them had the same look in their eyes. They knew what was coming. They knew what they had to do. A young officer stood at the front of the room. He could not have been more than 30. His uniform was crisp, his posture perfect. You will be trained for ship-to-ship boarding operations, he announced. The enemy is larger and stronger than us. They have personal shields. They have weapons we cannot match. He paused. But they have never fought humans before. They do not know what we are capable of. They think we are weak. He smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf. We are going to show them how wrong they are. Around the world, similar scenes played out. Factories that had been closed for years roared back to life. Satellites that had been listed as defunct began transmitting on frequencies no one had known existed. Research that had been called theoretical became very, very real. The Council watched Earth through their observation drones. They saw the humans doing what all primitive species did when faced with superior power: building camps, organizing their populations, preparing for submission. They did not see the construction happening underground. They did not see the shipyards hidden beneath the oceans. They did not see the weapons being built in facilities buried inside mountains. They saw only what humanity wanted them to see. Because humans had learned something long ago, something written into their blood by millions of years of evolution. Sometimes the best way to survive was to let your enemy think you were weak. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Let them believe they had already won. And then, when they least expected it, strike. Doctor worked without sleep for 5 days straight. On the 6th day, she solved a problem that had puzzled her for 30 years. On the 7th day, she built a prototype. On the 8th day, she tested it. The device was small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. It folded space. It created a tunnel through dimensions. It made shields useless. She held it up to the light and laughed until tears ran down her face. Day by day, the pieces came together. The ships, the weapons, the soldiers, the scientists, everything humanity had hidden for 70 years, every secret project, every impossible dream, all of it gathered in the darkness, waiting. Waiting for the to come. Waiting to show the galaxy what humans really were. On the 29th day, the Harvest Fleet entered the Sol system. Fleet Commander watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger. He was old for a nearly 400 years, and he had commanded more harvest operations than he could remember. He had taken worlds with populations in the billions. He had crushed species that thought they could resist. He had seen every form of defiance, every desperate last stand, every futile gesture of pride. They all ended the same way. The fleet spread out behind him like a wall of death, 400 ships arranged in perfect formation. The smallest was 2 kilometers long. The largest, his flagship, measured nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern. Their energy signatures burned against the darkness of space like small suns. Reports commanded. His tactical officer, a younger named, studied the sensor displays. No organized resistance detected, Commander. The human communication channels are quiet. Their orbital platforms remain in defensive positions but show no signs of activation. Made a sound deep in his throat. It was almost disappointment. He had hoped the humans might try something. The harvests were always more interesting when the prey fought back a little. Continue approach, he ordered. The fleet moved past the outer planets, past the gas giants with their swirling storms, past the asteroid belt where humans had tried to build their first mining colonies, past the red planet they called Mars. Nothing challenged them. Felt the familiar boredom of an easy victory settling over him. The humans were doing what all weak species did, accepting their fate, preparing their populations for collection, making lists of resources and labor pools. Good, this would be quick and clean. The fleet passed the human moon and took up position in orbit around Earth. The planet hung below them, blue and green and white with clouds. It was a pretty world, admitted, small but pretty. The humans had not ruined it completely, which was fortunate. Ruined worlds were worth less. Open a channel, commanded. The communication officer worked his controls. "Channel open, Commander." Leaned forward in his command chair. He had given this speech many times before. The words came automatically. "Species human. I am Fleet Commander of the Sovereignty. Your council-mandated preparation period has ended. You will lower your planetary defenses and prepare for population transfer. Resistance will be met with." He stopped. Something was happening to his screens. Every display on the bridge flickered. The tactical readouts disappeared. The sensor feeds went dark. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then an image appeared. It was a human, an old man with silver hair and a lined face. He wore a simple uniform. He was smiling. Recognized him. This was the human who had stood before the council, the one who had said nothing, the one who had simply turned and walked away. Admiral Park. Behind him, something was moving. The image pulled back, showing more and more of the space around the human flagship. And rising from the darkness, from places that had not thought to look, came ships. Not hundreds. Thousands. They rose from the dark side of Earth's moon. They emerged from beneath the ice of Europa. They poured out of hollowed asteroids in the belt. They came from everywhere at once, appearing like ghosts from the void. The ships were small compared to the fleet. They were ugly. They had no elegance, no grace. They looked like weapons with engines attached, built by people who did not care about beauty, built by people who cared only about killing. His tactical officer was screaming numbers. "Commander, sensors detecting. Detecting. I cannot. The numbers are still climbing." "How many?" demanded. The officer looked at him with something like fear. "Over 7,000, and still counting." 7,000 ships, hidden for 30 days, hidden for 70 years. On every screen in the fleet, Admiral Park spoke a single sentence. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "We accept your terms." The transmission ended, and the guns opened fire. The first wave of human ships hit the formation like a hammer hitting glass. They were small and fast, darting through the spaces between the larger alien vessels. They died by the hundreds, their primitive hulls torn apart by energy weapons. But they kept coming. Captain O flew a ship no larger than a shuttle. It had no shields, no faster-than-light drive. By any reasonable measure, it was a coffin with an engine. It also carried 8 devices designed by Dr. Watched his squadron die around him. Pilots he had trained with, friends he had known for years. They burned, one by one, their ships becoming bright flowers of fire against the darkness. He did not stop, he did not slow down. His target was a dreadnought, one of the largest ships in the fleet. Its shields glowed blue with power. Its weapons tracked the human attackers, picking them off with mechanical precision. His hands moved over his controls. He armed the devices. A weapon struck his ship. Alarms screamed. Fire filled the cockpit. He felt pain, terrible pain, but his hands did not stop moving. He was close now, close enough. He pressed the button. The devices activated. Space folded. For just a moment, a tunnel opened through dimensions, a path that bypassed the shield entirely. 8 thermonuclear warheads detonated inside the dreadnought. The ship died. 3 kilometers of alien technology and alien crew, gone in an instant. Died with it. His last thought was of his mother waiting for him at home. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships died by the hundreds, but they took ships with them, one by one, piece by piece. Captain Shin commanded a vessel that had been a submarine 4 weeks ago. Now it carried weapons that should not have existed. Rail cannons that accelerated tungsten rods to a fraction of light speed. At that velocity, the rods could not be stopped. They simply arrived. "Target the command ship," she ordered. Her crew worked in silence. They had trained for this. They had dreamed of this. Now they lived it. The first rod struck the Eternal Hunger's shields. The shields flickered but held. The second rod struck in the same place. The shields cracked. The third rod punched through. Commander felt his flagship shudder. Damage reports flooded the bridge. Hull breaches on 12 decks. Engine power dropping. Weapons systems failing. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." The humans should not have been able to hurt them. The humans should not have had these weapons. The humans should have been helpless, should have been weak, should have been everything the Council said they were. But the Council had been wrong. The battle raged for 6 hours. The fleet lost 212 ships. They destroyed over 1,000 human vessels. The exchange rate should have meant victory. But the humans kept coming. When one ship died, 2 more took its place. When one squadron was destroyed, another emerged from hiding. They fought without mercy, without hesitation, without any of the honor that civilized species were supposed to show. They fought like humans had always fought. To win. As the 6th hour ended, Commander made the hardest decision of his long life. "All ships," he commanded, "retreat." The fleet turned and ran. They fled past the moon, past Mars, past the asteroid belt. They fled toward the edge of the system as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. The humans did not pursue. They let the aliens go. They wanted survivors. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the galaxy to know what had happened here. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the ships disappear into the darkness. His face showed no triumph, no satisfaction, only the tired sadness of a man who had seen too much death. Around him his crew was silent. They had won. They had paid a terrible price, but they had won. Closed his eyes and thought of all the pilots who would never come home, all the soldiers who had given everything, all the scientists who had worked without sleep to give them a chance. He thought of Captain O, burning against the side of a dreadnought. He thought of the 3,000 ships that had died today. Then he opened his eyes and began planning for what came next. The Council would respond. They had to. Earth had challenged the order of the galaxy. And humanity would be ready. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On every world, in every system, beings of 1,000 different species watched the recordings in disbelief. The Harvest Fleet, 400 ships strong, had been broken by a species that could not even leave its own solar system. A species the Council had declared weak. A species that had been given 30 days to prepare for slavery. The recordings showed everything. The human ships appearing from nowhere. The impossible weapons that ignored shields. The brutal, relentless attacks that continued even as human vessels died by the hundreds. And worst of all, the silence. The humans had not demanded surrender. They had not offered terms. They had not made speeches or threats or promises. They had simply attacked, and they had not stopped attacking until the fleet fled. The galaxy did not know what to make of this. The Archon called an emergency session of the Council. Every species sent representatives. The chamber was packed with beings who had watched their understanding of the universe crumble in 6 hours of footage. "This cannot be allowed to stand," the ambassador hissed. Its scales had lost their shimmer. Its movements were jerky, agitated. "The humans must be punished. They have violated the most basic laws of civilized behavior." "What laws?" asked the representative of a species of small, quick-moving creatures who traded in information. "They did exactly what the Council told them to do. They accepted the harvest. They destroyed our fleet." "Yes, and in doing so they proved they were strong enough to refuse harvest." They made a chittering sound that might have been laughter. "The law is clear. The strong rule, the weak serve. You declared them weak. You were wrong." The argument continued for hours. Some species demanded revenge. Others demanded caution. Still others simply wanted to understand what had happened. While the Council debated, the war continued. Commander had retreated to a staging area 3 light-years from Earth. His fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength. Many of the surviving ships were damaged. His crew was demoralized, frightened in ways they had never been frightened before. But he did not accept defeat. He sent a message to the sovereignty requesting reinforcements. While he waited, he planned. The humans had surprised him once. They would not surprise him again. 3 weeks later, a new fleet arrived. 2,000 ships, fresh and undamaged, carrying the finest soldiers they had to offer. With his combined force, now commanded more firepower than any fleet in history. "We will burn their planet," he announced to his officers. "We will break their ships. We will show the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place." The fleet advanced toward Earth. But the humans were not idle. In the weeks since the first battle, humanity had not rested. The shipyards worked without pause. The factories produced weapons and armor and ammunition around the clock. Every man and woman who could fight was trained. Every mind that could think was put to work solving problems. Admiral Park knew they would return. He had been counting on it. When the alien fleet appeared at the edge of the system, it found Earth waiting. Not just the surviving ships from the first battle, but new ones. Thousands of new ones. "They have learned nothing," Commander said quietly. Nodded, "Then we will teach them again." The second battle began. This time the humans did not simply defend. They attacked. Captain Shin led a strike force of 300 ships straight at the heart of the formation. Her vessel, rebuilt and upgraded since the first battle, cut through the alien fleet like a knife through water. "Target their command structure," she ordered. "Break their coordination." Her ships obeyed, rail cannons fired, missiles launched, space itself seemed to burn. They fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were powerful. Their ships were vast. But they fought like they always fought, with patterns and formations and tactics that had not changed in 1,000 years. The humans fought differently. Sergeant Park had been training for this moment for 23 days. She and her team of veterans had learned every weakness of physiology. They had studied the layout of ships. They had practiced until their movements were automatic. Now she led a boarding party onto a carrier. The airlock blew open. She was the first through, her boots hitting the alien deck before the smoke cleared. A warrior was waiting for her. It was twice her size, its scales gleaming, its personal shield glowing faintly around it. It raised a weapon and fired. Ducked, the shot passed over her head. She threw a device at and dove to the side. The device was another of Doctor's creations. It created a tiny fold in space, just enough to disrupt the shield for half a second. Half a second was enough. Snipe found the gap between the scales. They screamed and fell. She did not stop to watch it die. There were more ahead, always more. Her team moved through the ship like ghosts. They killed silently when they could, loudly when they had to. They planted explosives in critical systems. They disabled weapons. They sowed chaos. They could not understand how to fight them. Their enemies were smaller, weaker, easier to kill. But they kept coming. They would not stop. They would not surrender. One officer cornered 3 human soldiers in a corridor. He was bigger than all of them combined. He had killed dozens of enemies in his long career. The first human threw himself at the officer's legs, knocking him off balance. The second drove a blade into his throat. The third finished him with a point-blank shot. All 3 humans died in the attack. They did not hesitate. They did not try to escape. They simply accepted that they would die and made sure to take their enemy with them. This was what the Council had not understood. This was what they had not expected. Humans did not fight for honor. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight according to rules that made sense to civilized species. They fought to survive. They fought for their children. They fought for the simple, brutal right to exist. And they were very, very good at it. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting. 3 days of ships burning and soldiers dying and weapons firing until they melted from the heat. 3 days of hell. When it ended, the fleet had ceased to exist. Not retreated, not damaged, destroyed. Commander died on the third day when a human boarding team reached his bridge. He fought well, killing 6 of them before they brought him down. His last sight was a human woman with hair and a baker's calluses on her hands, standing over him with a bloody knife. Sergeant Park did not say anything. There was nothing to say. She simply turned and walked away, leaving the alien commander to die alone. The humans lost half their fleet in the battle. Tens of thousands of soldiers died. The cost was terrible, worse than anything humanity had experienced in its long history of war. But they won. Admiral Park stood in the ruins of his flagship's bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his crew, and watched the last ship burn. "Send a message to Earth," he said quietly. "Tell them we are coming home." Then he sat down among the dead and closed his eyes. He did not sleep, he had forgotten how. But for just a moment, he allowed himself to hope. The galaxy was watching. The Council was watching. Every species that had ever called humanity weak, that had ever laughed at their small ships and fragile bodies, was watching. And now they knew the truth. Humans were not weak, they were not primitive, they were not prey. They were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen. Not because of their technology, not because of their weapons, but because they would never, ever give up. The Council would have to respond to this. They would have to acknowledge what Earth had done, and intended to make sure they never forgot it. The Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime had never been so silent. Every seat was filled. Every species had sent its highest representatives. Beings who had not left there in centuries had traveled across the galaxy to be present for this moment. The air itself seemed heavy with tension, thick with fear and wonder and something that might have been awe. The footage from Earth had changed everything. Not just the first battle, where humanity had revealed its hidden fleet. Not just the second battle, where they had destroyed 2,000 ships, but everything that came after. The recordings showed human soldiers boarding alien vessels and fighting hand-to-hand against enemies twice their size. They showed human pilots flying their ships into the hearts of dreadnoughts, accepting death to ensure victory. They showed human scientists working without sleep for days, weeks, months, creating weapons that broke the laws of physics. They showed a species that should have been helpless, a species that should have been weak, a species that had been given 30 days to accept slavery. Instead, that species had burned the most powerful fleet in the galaxy and asked for more. The doors at the bottom of the chamber opened. Admiral Park walked in first. He looked older than before. The battles had taken something from him, carved new lines into his face and added more silver to his hair. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man carrying a great weight. But his eyes were still sharp, his spine was still straight, he was still a soldier. Commander walked beside him. She had lost her left arm in the second battle when a weapon had breached her ship's hull. The replacement was metal and plastic, nothing like flesh, but she did not hide it. She wore her wound like a medal. Lieutenant Lee brought up the rear. He had been on one of the boarding teams. He had killed 11 with his own hands. He did not look like a tactical analyst anymore. He looked like what he had become, a warrior. The 3 humans walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. They did not bow, they did not speak, they simply waited. The Archon descended from its position at the highest point of the chamber. Its crystalline form flickered with colors no human could see, patterns that might have meant anger or fear or something else entirely. "Species human," the Archon announced. "You have been summoned before this council to answer for your actions." Said nothing. "You have destroyed a sanctioned harvest fleet. You have killed hundreds of thousands of citizens. You have violated every protocol of civilized warfare." Still nothing. The Archon's form pulsed with agitation. It was not used to being ignored. No species had ever stood before the Council without speaking. The Council demands an explanation. Finally moved, he looked up at the gathered aliens, his eyes moving from face to face, from species to species. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. You declared us weak. The words hung in the air like smoke. You measured our technology and found it lacking. You measured our biology and found it fragile. You measured our weapons and called them primitive. He paused. You measured everything except what matters. The ambassador rose from its seat. Its scales had lost all their color, turned and dull. It was the last survivor of its delegation. The others had died in the second battle. You murdered our people, it hissed. Hundreds of thousands of lives. You came to enslave us, interrupted. His voice did not rise, but the ambassador fell silent. You came to take our children from their homes. You came to break our families. You came to make us into tools, resources, property. He took a step forward. And you thought we would simply accept it. You thought we would bow our heads and let you take everything we love. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You were wrong. Commander stepped forward. Her metal arm gleamed in the light of the chamber. You asked for an explanation, she said. Here it is. We are human. We come from a world that has tried to kill us from the moment we were born. We have survived ice ages and plagues and famines. We have survived wars that lasted generations. We have survived everything our planet could throw at us, and we have survived each other. She raised her metal arm. This is what we are. This is what you failed to measure. Not our ships, not our weapons, our will, our refusal to die, our absolute, unbreakable determination to protect what we love. Lieutenant Lee pulled a small device from his pocket. A holographic display sprang to life, showing Earth surrounded by thousands of ships. In 30 days, he said, we built a fleet capable of defeating a galactic power. We did this because you told us we could not. We did this because our children were in danger. He deactivated the display. Given another 30 days, we will build another fleet. Given a year, we will have enough ships to challenge any force in this galaxy. He looked around the chamber. And we will never stop. As long as our world exists, as long as a single human draws breath, we will fight. We will build. We will survive. That is what you face, not a species, a force of nature. The chamber was utterly silent. Admiral Park stepped forward one final time. He looked up at the council, at the thousands of beings who had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, and he spoke the words that would change everything. Earth is no longer requesting protectorate status. Earth is requesting council membership. A sound rippled through the chamber, shock, outrage, disbelief. That is impossible, the Archon said. A species cannot simply demand. We are not demanding, said. We are informing you of what will happen. You will vote on our membership. You will accept it. And from this day forward, Earth will be treated as an equal member of this council. And if we refuse? Smile widened slightly. You saw what we did with 30 days of preparation. You saw what we did when we had nothing to lose. He let the words sink in. Do you really want to find out what we can do with decades, with centuries? The silence stretched on. The Archon turned to face the chamber. It did not speak, but something passed between the gathered species. A communication, a decision. When the Archon turned back to the humans, its crystalline form had stopped flickering. It was calm now, resigned. The council will vote. The vote took less than a minute. One by one, species raised their appendages or tentacles or crystalline protrusions in support of Earth's membership. The result was unanimous. Admiral Park watched the votes tally and he felt something loosen in his chest. It was not quite relief. Too many people had died for relief, but it was something close. Earth welcomes this decision, he said formally. We look forward to peaceful cooperation with all member species." He turned to leave, but then he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder at the assembled council. "There is one more thing," he said. "The council declared Earth weak because we had no energy shields, no faster-than-light weapons, no galactic technology." He met the Archon's gaze. "We had none of those things because we never needed them. We have spent our entire existence fighting ourselves. Now we have something else to fight for." He glanced at the waiting for them beyond the stars. "We have a future." Without another word, the three humans turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind them, the council sat in stunned silence. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had believed they understood everything about power and strength and survival. Now they knew they had understood nothing. The humans walked back to their ship. They flew back to Earth. They landed on soil that their ancestors had walked, beneath stars that their descendants would one day claim. And as Admiral Park stepped off the shuttle and looked up at the sky, he allowed himself one small moment of peace. The battle was won. The war was over. Humanity had found its place among the stars. Not as servants, not as slaves, not as the weak species the Council had dismissed. As equals, as allies, as the most stubborn, most determined, most utterly unwilling to die species the galaxy had ever known. They had asked for humanity's answer. Humanity had given it. Not with words, with fire, with blood, with the simple, undeniable truth that they would never, ever stop fighting for what they loved. The stars burned above, and somewhere out in the darkness, the galaxy was learning what that meant.